Now, what I had done is prepare a 5-page report on highway beautification, single-spaced. And Kay Danes, that I've referenced to you before, this was typed up in his office at J.C. Penney Company. And between Kay Danes, William Kay Danes is the name, Kay Danes and I, but this was his gift. This is what he's at. He's an attorney, and he could do it better than I could. I couldn't have done this without him. I had the ideas of what had to be in there, but he had the way of being able to integrate that within let's say, the appropriate manner in which it needs to be displayed to fit the style of Washington, D.C.'s communications back and forth. So I got into his office. What I went through was an education, a real education. I went through this guy and that guy and that guy to get through. I laid that draft, that letter out to him. And he took that letter and he read it. Every word on 5 pages. And I sat there. And he got through, looked up at me. He says, an important document you must read at least twice. So then he went and he reread it a second time, all the way through. And he said this, so simple, so logical, why didn't we think of this? Was how he answered. He says, we will go ahead with this. It might not be in the exact form that you have, but substantively speaking, it will be done as you have written right here. Congratulations. So you can well imagine how I feel about to this day. Chuck Coleson just died a year ago. And it touched my heart greatly to have lost that man. I had the White House. 7 months to get it. But I got it. Went back to Clue. Told him what had happened. That money will be appropriated. It wasn't $5 million. It wasn't $15 million. It was $150 million. Was put into the budget. So it was much more than I originally dreamed of. I'm thinking at this time, if I can, of 1776 in the Continental Congress, and the Congress had set up a committee of 5 to write the Declaration of Independence, and gave them all the time that they would need. Now, of the 5, the 3 that count the most was Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania. He was the oldest and most held in the highest esteem. Secondly would be Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, who was by far the richest of any of those assemblymen there, and absolutely brilliant. And number 3 was John Adams. And then the 2 other, one from Connecticut and one from New York. He didn't play a major role in the writing of that Declaration of Independence. Adams spoke up when they had their first meeting and says, I nominate that who should write this? Thomas Jefferson. In the first place, he can write better than any of us. This kind of a document. By the way, he was the youngest one of the 5. Secondly, he said, he is well liked. He's more popular than I am. And so therefore what he writes has a greater likelihood of being accepted than if I were to write it, for example. The others voted and said and agreed for Jefferson to write it. It was made available on the 1st of July. And the debate started. And finally it got down to the 2nd of July, and the debate was continuing, and the day was very rainy. The problem is that the delegation from New Jersey had not shown up. They had to have all of that delegation there. John Adams got up the first day. He literally carried the day. He had never, ever spoken so eloquently and so passionately and so logically as he did in support of this Declaration of Independence. Jefferson sat and never said one word, not one word. And then what had happened, that when he finished, towards the end of the day, the New Jersey delegation showed up. The president of the Senate turned to Adams and said, "Would you please repeat what you have said for that delegation? There's no one can match what you have said." He says, "I can't do it. I'm so exhausted. I put everything I had into it. I can't do it." And he said, "You've got to do it." And he stood. Now, the historians write that he was, if not equal to what he said originally, perhaps better. It was as if the light was around him. He just shined. It was raining so hard that you could hear the patter of that rain hitting the windows. And that was the only interruption, was the noise from the rain. Well, and then it was approved and signed on the 4th day. It had to be copied on the 3rd day for them to sign. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitled them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these rights, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, this is the first part of the Declaration. Now, what follows that are the grievances that the 13 colonies and their inhabitants had against the rule of the British Empire. Well, I could go into a number of aspects here as to why that rule was very reasonable compared with any other country. So what you had Great Britain, you had Spain, you had France, and you had Holland, and you had Portugal. These were the nations that were exploring the world. Now, of those, the most reasonable was Great Britain. And it probably more than anything else goes to two people. One is Henry II, who was married to Eleanor of Aquitaine, and that gave them the empire of most of France and all of the British Isles, was that marriage. Now, what made that marriage so important is that Henry was positioned with that marriage that then he could take and conquer, if he wanted to, the rest of Europe. But he didn't. His competition was the church, the Catholic Church. And so he figured how he could compete and elevate his kingship against the Catholic Church was through the court system. So he set up his own court system. Now, that court system was more fair than the Catholic Church's was. In this instance, it was Henry II said that a man is innocent until he's proven guilty. In the Catholic Church, a man is guilty until he's proven innocent. So the burden of proof is on the one accusing. And that's the difference. That set England apart, or the British Isles apart from every other government to this day. It's just rather amazing. Now, then the last sentence of that Declaration of Independence to me is the most humbling. And that reads this: "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor." John Hancock, President. Attested, Charles Thompson, Secretary. July 4th, 1776.